So security challenges today, we have a few of them. Survey response felt that the threat intel was not timely. Survey response unable to prioritize threats and categories, and survey response lack of context and threat intel. This caused us to start thinking and create a security ecosystem license and try to fix this. There's way too many security tools for any one environment to work together with or for anyone to use. So you need to pick and choose which ones you want. And there's a lot of different types of security threats out there that you need all of these different vendors. So the next part is really getting into details here. This is going to be walking you through how to create your own templates. So let's say we don't already have an appliance set up or an integration already set up for you. You can create your own integrations. Obviously, like I showed in the very first slide, there's thousands of different appliances. We don't have time to create integration with each one. We use this for you to quickly, more easily integrate with other appliances and gives you more options than you would normally have. So let's go ahead and get started. The templates. So how to implement Outbound API. You need to select the events you need, such as RPZ, ADP, tunneling, host, so on and so forth. And I showed that early in the notifications to select your notifications you want. You need to check third-party vendors. Now it's documentation and define which API calls to make. Again, the WAPI documentation is really useful for this. Getting the what kind of posts and gets you can do through the REST API. You also have to check to make sure that the third party also has a REST API or some sort of API to send information back and forth. If they don't have that, yeah, then we couldn't use the security ecosystem. But for the most part, I haven't found another third party vendor that hasn't used some sort of REST API. So you're pretty solid there for the most part. Check all required data available to trigger the events. If it's not there, if the data is not available, and you can check which data is available. If I can go back to the appliance here, I'll actually show you. You can run a test event. You can use a test rule, and you pretty much just test it. And then on the actual endpoint, you can go to the bug log here. I'm getting detailed here. You can actually see what information is pushed over. And obviously, this is pretty hard to see. I would probably just copy it over and paste it to some sort of text editor so you can actually view what information you have for each type of event. Each event is different. Obviously, I guess not so obvious. It's like an release event will have different information sent over than an RPZ event or somebody trying to access that domain, such as like where they're going, who they are, stuff like that. Yeah. Find nice API calls need. Yeah, if any data is missing, you can try creating more API calls. You're not limited by how many calls you can make, so definitely take advantage of that. Good practices is use a curl or HTTP client. Any HTTP client, Postman's pretty popular. You can use curl, which is just a built-in automatically on most Macs, all Macs, I believe. And you just check to make sure those calls work. And then from there, you can actually just put those into the templates itself and you're good to go from there. You're pretty much integrated. You can actually add more logic, and we'll get more into detail on the logic here in just a minute. Hopefully I can rush through this as I'm running out of time, but we'll see what we can do. Session and action templates. So we have two types of templates, or 4 types of templates here. So you got session templates, you got action templates, and you got login and log out templates. And what each these do. So the session template allows you to dictate the logic of the template itself. So if you're looping through the template, there's an option to skip to a new step or even go back a couple of steps. You're going to keep looping through it. This allows you to dictate how many times you can loop through before it stops it. So for example, you have a step execution limit. If you set it to 10, it can only loop through 10 times before it stops. And this is just to stop any infinite loops and causing the appliance to slow down and be bogged down by the ecosystem license. And not just that, but also allows you to have more options and choices. Sometimes they won't all be present right away, and you have to create a session template to activate the logic or get the information. That can be found the chapter 45 of the admin guide. Yeah, action templates, this is where the actual magic happens. The type of events, as stated in the slide before, you got RPZ, tunnel lease, network IPv4, and these kind of events can be sent post requests, get requests. It can create logic behind that as well. Log in, log out templates allows you to log into an appliance and keep logged in until you're done, and then log out. And these are pretty useful for things such as Rapid7 uses it, Tenable SC, and you can look at these templates and see kind of what the logic is working. You can implement that logic back into your own templates if need be. There's a lot of copying and pasting that can be done. So this is sample session template. So some of the important information here is stuff like the version. If you're not specifying an earlier version, even if you have a later release of NIOS, it won't use that logic. So for example, if you put in version 1 and you still have NIOS 8.2, because you put version 1 into here, if you put version 1 into here, you'll still be using the logic based off of NIOS 8.0. However, if you have NIOS 8.0 and you put it in version 3, it won't work. It'll throw an error for you. So make sure you take the version and make sure that matches your NIOS release. Other important information is in the session template, you have to actually dictate what your login and logout templates are going to be. For Tenable SC, this is an example of Tenable SC login, logout. It tells you what templates to use when you log in and out of the execution of the template. Other information that might be useful would be things such as the path override. So you don't have to write, /rest or a lot of times it'll be like a /API. You don't want to write that every time. It's a good option for you just to override the path and select that right after the URL. And then you can add in the additional logic afterwards as well. This is a sample login action template. Some of the information here is important for, again, version, content type. We don't just use JSON. We also work with XML and a lot of other ones. You can check all the different type of content types that we have on the admin guide. The event type is a session in this case. The important thing here also is the steps. You notice that this one has a step where the session template didn't have any steps. These steps are actually going to be the logic of it, and we'll get into more of this. This is more of the detailed information, where you have things such as the operation type is nope, you got post commands, you have conditions. We'll get into those. That's, I think, the more important, so we'll be rushing to those here soon. This is kind of like the variables that you can use inside these templates and how the variables work. Like in any coding language, you're going to have a variable type and then the variable object itself. Here we do a namespace. So namespaces, we have a few of them, such as E, L, I, P, and you can see them all here. And these tell you different things. You can look at the admin guide on chapter 45. It'll actually tell you what each one of these does. Probably the two most important you're going to be using are the event data and local variables, as well as the P variable, the response data. The response data is when you make a GET request, it's going to populate the P namespace with whatever it returns. And also when you do a delete or a post, it will populate whatever that return is into the response. So these three are really useful. The other ones are also really useful depending on what you're trying to do. After that, you're going to have that output format in this. And you know it's a variable when it has a $sign ahead of it. So the next thing you're going to look for is the output format. We have different formats such as is, meaning when it's put into this variable, it already has a data type. You can also dictate what the data type is going to be, such as string, a number, Boolean, and length. And you have to dictate that each time when you use the variable. When you actually push information into this variable, which is in this case network city, network EA city, you don't actually have to tell it what type of, you won't tell it what type of format it's going to be. Only when you're actually using the variable itself will you need to use explain what the format's going to be in the template. Then we also have operations. This is important with the logic of the template. You know it's a operation when it's a variable. You know it's going to be a variable, and then you see the XC in front of it. It just tells you there's some sort of variable about to happen. These are some of the commands that can be executed and examples of how they work. For example, you can assign a variable. In this case, I know earlier I showed that there's format types of type S, and there's also data namespaces, which are ELIPH. When you're assigning a variable, the second one is actually assigning a data type. So in this case, it's a string ABC, and you're putting it into the L namespace called string. And this is pretty much just a list. Each one of these namespaces are just a list of information for you to pull from. Got things such as debug. This is going to be really useful when you're actually creating your templates. Really good information for you to use. Copy. Copy is actually pulling information from one namespace to another namespace. You can increment things such as integers or IPs. You can decrement things such as integers or IPs. Delete variables, and there's a lot more. You need to find them all on the admin guide on chapter 45. So these are some of the operations that we have that I explained earlier. I think I explained it earlier. Well, anyways, so some of the steps that we have are such as nope, which is parse the text of the specific body. We got sleep, we got a get, post, patch, delete. Those are important for pushing and pulling information across the web. We have a special type of step operations such as DXL EVENT SEND. And this was specific to the McAfee DXL. So we do have some special step types. But for the most part, if you're going to be integrating with other parties that we don't already have, you're going to be using these kind of operation steps. I think I showed it earlier. Oh yeah, here we go. In the sample login action template, you got things operations such as nope. You got a post operation, you have a condition operation here, and inside of these, we'll walk through each one of those what they do. And again, more just condition steps, variable op steps, and serialize. We'll walk through some of those and what they do. So here's right here, explain it a little bit more. When you're debugging, this is probably going, or when you're creating templates, this could be one of the most important variables to use is debug, and this allows you to use. See what's in the namespace itself. It actually prints it out for you. So if you're wanting to know what's in the L namespace, it'll print it out, or in the events namespace, it'll print it out for you on the screen so you can view it in the debug log. Sleep allows you just to stop it for a minute. Let's say you posted something to a third-party appliance. You then want to, that it's going to take a while for it to be processed. You want to sleep and stop the execution of the template for a little bit, make sure it catches up on the other side. So we allow you to do that. Other thing is the nope operation, and this is really important for the executions and the pretty much a function that's preset in there for you already. So for example, you can use this for assign, copy, all the ones that I've listed earlier. If I can find it here real fast, all these command executions can be performed in the NOP step. Yeah, so we have things such as assign. Again, that's just assigning a variable type. So in this case, it's a string. If you want to put a Boolean in there, you just simply type in a B. Now it's a Boolean going into the L namespace. Other things such as copy, you're actually copying one namespace to the other. And then also you got format. You can format turnkit, and then it can explain this what it does, and pretty much some of these allow you to edit the format of timestamps. These are useful when you're trying to figure out, hey, when did this occur? And it will actually you can post that information when the event occurred into a special format, so it's better, easier to read for you. Other sample steps are condition steps. So this is probably one of the most used logically. In this case, it's a condition. Kind of in this case, it's an and. You can also have and or statements. So if either one of these two conditions were true, it would then trigger in the last step here. Or you can put and where you select that both of these have to be true. If both of these are true, it will actually go to a next step. Next allows you to go to any step in the template itself. So if I want to go back a step, I can just put the name right here, the name of the next step behind it, into the next step. Assuming, of course, that both of these were true, both these statements were true. Else eval, this is just a way to, if it's not true, to do something. So not only in the NOP, but also in condition steps. Once a condition is met or not met, you can actually assign variables, copy variables, print out debug logs, information like that. So if you find that there's an error, you can actually print out the debug log in the condition statement right away, rather than waiting for the next step to print it out. Sample step, get, put. So these are just examples of how we push information and grab information. Here we can see the operations to get. We're parsing out JSON and the path for it. For example, asset. Here's it's nice to see that you can actually use a variable. Let's say you want a specific asset ID based off of some logic that you perform. You can actually put that information in there and automatically grab the ID when you do the get command from the third-party appliance or from your own appliance. Yeah. Put information, again, kind of the same idea. You got the put, you got your path. And you can pretty much use these variables. Remember, with the $, it's a variable anywhere you want, including in the body, anywhere. And we'll populate that information with whatever is in this case, the L namespace as is, and the object in the list is object reference. And that can be pushed in through the path. And of course, when you put the information over, you need the body list, and it's put it in there. When you're pushing information over, sometimes you'll have quotes inside quotes. Just a simple / will allow you to put quotes inside of it when you're pushing information over, pulling information. This is an example of the DXL event send. This is specific to McAfee DXL. We do have some vendor-specific steps. So in this case, DXL event send. And again, like I said before, if you have quotes inside quotes, you can just populate it with a / and it'll get rid of that. Yeah, same idea as push and get, or put and get as before the last slide. Sample steps. This is the VARIABLEOP. So VARIABLEOP is pretty much allows you to, it's like a stack or a queue. It allows you to push stuff from the top or from the bottom of a list of objects. So if you have a large list of objects and you just want to, like, for example, you populate it with 255 IPs, you get the whole network, the /24 network, and you populate it into a list. You just want to pop the next IP. You can use unshift, or you can pop it from this top by using the pop command. You have a lot of different options for how it's actually used. You can check out the pages on the admin guide, chapter 45, just assign push shift, pop shift. Those things are going to allow you to see all the different types of like stack and queue operations you have with the templates. So there's some more basic information. Just winding down here. Time's coming up, but Outbound API basic practices. Run the Outbound API on a Gridmaster candidate. I think I stated that earlier, but it doesn't really take that much resources off of your Gridmaster or off of your appliance. But just for best practices, just to be safe, always, we want to give you the best options. So put it on a Gridmaster candidate. Want to filter out the events of the notification level and then the template. So if I go back to the appliance, you want to actually check the notifications off. You want to really narrow down what you want based off of the notification levels. Maybe it's not a /8, but maybe a /24. That really narrows it down a lot more. And we suggest that you use the notification and then use the templates for extra narrowing it down even more. Duplicate events, we max out to 10 minutes. That's for the duplication. Other things, don't use the debug log in production. That just uses slightly more resources. We obviously want to be as efficient as possible. So switch it from debug to info, warning, or error. Info is usually pretty popular. It takes some time to apply the changes. So if you change something on the template, say you're editing this and you want to test it out, the second you change it, it's not going to trigger right away as being set. You have to wait like 1 or 2 or 3 seconds before it actually allow the changes to apply. API notes. If a template generates an error, it can be re-executed, and that can be done through the session management template. You can actually dictate how many times it's re-executed, how many times, how much time before it logs out. You have all that control at the session template level from the session template. Step execution limit prevents infinite loops. Yeah, this is really important. Set that however you want. I think it's limited to like 10 or 100. I don't remember which one it is, but you can increase that. If you know you're going to loop through 1,000 times, you can set that to a higher number. It'll allow you to loop more. Events can be dropped if the queue is full. So we only hold up to the first 10,000 events, I believe it was, last time I checked. And after that, if that queue is filled past that, it will drop the event. So that's why we encourage you to do deduplication events. If you get somebody on a virus on your computer and starts trying to access this bad website, you don't want all those events to be sent out at once. You just want to know, like, hey, that IP, try to access this bad site. It might be doing it more, but you're going to send an incident out. You don't want to send out 1,000 incidents all at once because you'll overload your queue and bad things can happen. If you disable a notification, the queue will process until empty. So yeah, I think that's self-explanatory. High availability is not supported. So if you have 2 appliances on high availability and it switches over, anything in that queue will be lost. So if there's something that's already been triggered and all of a sudden the appliance shuts down and switches over, it won't save that information to the next pair. It'll actually, it just won't remember that queue and it'll just be gone. If you add, modify, delete mass objects in a template, relevant notifications are triggered. Yep. And update the extensible attribute trigger modify event for the same object. Yeah. Yep. So thank you for coming and watching. Hopefully I was able to give you some detailed information, hopefully some high level. And also I try to put in as much really detailed information for creating your own templates. If you have any extra questions, I know I went through a lot really fast. So don't be afraid to ask for something I might have missed or something you'd like more details on.
Awesome, Kevin. I think it has been a great presentation, demo, and Outbound API walkthrough. So what I would do is I would request our audience to go ahead and put their questions in the Q&A tool so that we can answer them. But I would also like to put the poll to request their feedback as well while they are thinking about the question. So let me do that.
Okay.
Okay, so there is a question here. Why don't we get started on that first? How do I define template parameter variables?
How do you define template parameter variables? Sure. So let me actually go ahead and share my screen again here. If I go back to that slide I was using. So 2 ways. I'm kind of lost on the question, but I'm going to try to answer it. So there's 2 ways. You can assign a variable over from another variable. So for example, you can assign it from a string, a Boolean, an integer through the XE execution command. You can assign the string ABC to a new variable in the L namespace. Another way is to copy it over from one variable to the other. So let's say you have already a variable you want to use, but you want to put it into the E namespace. You can actually do that. You can copy it over quite nicely. Actually, I think these should be swapped. Whatever's on the right will be put into the left. The L namespace is usually what you're going to be using for keeping that information during the execution of the template. E namespace is the execution variable, so each one's going to be different. Yeah, those are the 2 ways you can define. Yep.
Awesome, awesome. So I think there is another question. It might have been answered, but I just want to ask you anyway. Is there a template for Splunk?
I don't know if there's a direct template for Splunk. I do know we integrate with Splunk, so we have an option to push our information over if that's something you're interested in. I didn't personally create any templates for Splunk. Perhaps somebody else's. You can explore the community website. I'm not sure of anything off the top of my head.
Okay, awesome. And I have one question, actually. It's not coming from the audience, but is there any limitation or a size limits or like a data limit in terms of this API if we want to do integration?
Yeah, so the only limit you really have is the queue size. So as it's executing, it does this one at a time. Once you hit 10,000, anything over that, it starts to just drop the event altogether. That's the only real limitation you have. You have unlimited number of API calls you can make. You might be limited by third-party software API calls. So, for example, I know Wally's limits you by like 300 API calls, might be 3,000 now. I don't remember how they do it. and they charge you based off how many API calls you make. So that is another limitation. Besides that, there's none on our side.
Great, great, awesome. So we have probably time for one more question. If you have any, please put it in the Q&A. We'll just give a minute to see if we have any last minute questions. Okay, so looks like we don't have any additional questions. So thanks once again, Kevin, for an awesome presentation. And I also want to thank our audience for joining. And so if you have any additional feedback, as well as if you like to see additional webinars in the same topic or something similar, please let us know. For example, taking a deeper dive on a specific integration, like a Aruba ClearPass or Splunk or some other integrations you might be interested in. We'll be happy to arrange a angle as well. So let me, there is one more question here. What steps are needed to be taken to empty ISE? That's the latest question.
Empty
ICE, yeah.
Cisco ICE, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
There need to be employee
and
employ ISE. Oh, right.
Yeah.
So to employ ISE, again, you need the Cisco ICE appliance, you'll need the Infoblox appliance, and then you'll need this ServiceNow security ecosystem license. And anything you want to have trigger to be sent over, such as, let's say, somebody's accessing a bad site, you want to send that information over, you'll need the RPZ license, or let's say you wanting, and I can actually share my screen for that for you real fast. I think answer this, but I can share my screen real fast, see if I can. Let me get that out for you. So if we go to licensing, you'll also need for anything that you'll want, for example, let's say DNS. If you're going to be using DNS, you'll need a DNS license. If you're going to be using Grid, you'll need the Grid license. But for the most part, just the Cisco ICE, Infoblox appliance, and then also security ecosystem license to get that integration working. So you can push and pull information back and forth, discovered information on the Infoblox appliance. You will also need Infoblox discovery. So you'll need that to actually grab that information and push it over. I'm sorry, there is also that you'll need to.
Great, awesome. So we will be able to provide this information in the email as well when we send out the archive. That way you have it in the written format as well. Thanks again, Kevin, and our awesome audience. And we would look forward to our next webinar, which is actually on June 5th. This is the second webinar on the DTC SE Tech Series. We'll be zooming in on a couple of case studies, use cases rather, that is employing GSLB global server load balancing capability from Infoblox to solve zone consolidation and the cloud use cases. So it will be an awesome presentation again. Would love all of you if you can join. So we will be sharing the webinar link, registration link as well in our follow-up email. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Srinivas.